I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa. We're Club 2500 in District 6110, and we are how large? We're one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world. I will be introducing our Rotary guests and their sponsoring Rotarian, if you would stand when I call your names. Bill Clintworth is the guest of Bob Vassar. Jeff Nolan is a guest of Chuck Wilson. Ruth Johnson is the guest of Paul Johnson. Chris Leggett is also the guest of Chuck Wilson. Lisa Turner is the guest of Michael Turner. Lynette Bradbury is the guest of Don Snowberger. Becky Griffiths is a guest of Matt Davis. Julie Hall is a guest of Karen Keith. Eloise Rogers is a guest of Dan Rogers. Philip Viles is a guest of Bob McKenzie. Katie Edwards is a guest of Chip Edwards. Elise Woolsey is a guest of Don Woolsey. Trey Biggs is a guest of Doug Stewart. Isaiah Edison is a guest of Stephanie Cameron. Nancy Shelton and Dennis Adloff are both a guest of Linda Adloff. Those are all our guests. If you welcome them with a round of applause. Before I introduce our visiting Rotarians, I have one other I wanted to, Jerry Murtor. He didn't bring a guest, but I love his shirt. I want him to stand up. Thank you, Jerry. So our visiting Rotarians, we have Mary Helen Stanley from the Will Rogers Club. And Sherry O'Neill from the Oklahoma City Club 29. And Wayne Schwanee from Bixby. Thank you for visiting our club, and come again.
Thank you, Tony. Our Rotary sponsors this week are Kevin Moody from Moody's Jewelry, John O'Connor, Newton O'Connor, Turner and Ketchum, Mike O'Brien, Creek County Landfill, Diane Peacock, Peacock Financial Services, LLC, and of course, we encourage you to do business with your fellow Rotarians. Please thank all of today's sponsors and all of our volunteers. Now, did you all see the slide that was up earlier for the mysterious Rotarian? Again, I thank Eric for helping with that. And those orange slips, if you would fill those out, if you have something that you really want to reveal to us, you'll see later who that individual is. So, moving there, see that? There's an individual somebody is writing on his back. And who is the Rotarian that allowed President Reagan, who was not president back then, to write on his back? We will find out later. All right, committee meetings for today. Classifications, room 234, Crescendo, room 231, Rotary Cares, 233, and Rotary Foundation, 232. And in other announcements, as some of you already know, our membership coordinator, Laurel Owens, plans to return to school full-time at the end of the month. We're going to miss her terribly. And she's not going to be replaced at this time, so just keep that in mind and have a little patience with our staff as they try to absorb some of those and maybe lean on volunteers a little bit more to help out. Now, throughout this year, we're going to be placing some special emphasis on supporting our International Rotary Foundation, as well as our local club foundation. And as part of that awareness, on every third Wednesday of the month, i.e. this week, I'll be asking you to wear your Paul Harris pin. And in the weeks ahead, we'll be explaining this unique giving challenge that was issued by RI President Ron Burton. That's kind of an exciting story. I'm also absolutely thrilled to announce that Rotarian Ron Butler is recuperating in a Phoenix hospital after his kidney transplant surgery yesterday. And as many of you know, Ron waited over 4.5 years to have this happen. So this is an incredible moment. And there's a giant piece of paper out there. So instead of just doing cards, we wanted everybody to sign this banner, and we'll roll it up and send it to him. He's going to be recovering for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll try to give you an update every week while he's there. Please don't send flowers. Flowers cannot go into the hospital at this time. And a trust fund has been established at Spirit Bank, thank you Spirit Bank, to receive donations to help defray the costs of the transplant surgery. And you can also follow Ron's progress on his wife Margaret's blog. So please keep the Butler family in your prayer. We have one new member to present today, so please welcome our membership chair, Chuck Wilson, as he introduces our newest member, Pete Smith.
"33 years ago, Mouzon Biggs and his family came to Tulsa in the middle of the night. Now, I didn't know that until I attended his celebration service a few weeks ago. It turned out to be more of a roast, though, actually, Mouzon. Some things were said that I never would have said about you, but anyway. It was a special time. The reason I'm telling you that is because Mouzon and I are co-sponsoring Pete Smith and welcoming him to our club. Pete joined Boston Avenue Church 30 years ago, just right after Mouzon arrived. He is the principal of Smith Financial Services. His classification is financial advisor. He has been helping people for years increase their wealth and giving advice regarding their finances. But the rest of the story is that the model for Pete, as it related to Rotary, was Mouzon. And he watched Mouzon, and he knew how dedicated and committed he was to Rotary. And because of that example and a little bit of work that we did together, I had the opportunity to invite Pete, along with Mouzon, to be a part of our club. He already abides by our four-way test, but I've given him a copy of that, and he's already wearing his lapel pin. So will you please join me in welcoming Pete to our club?
Now, after our meeting, Chuck is going to take Pete back in the back, kind of by the exit. So if you have an opportunity, please shake his hand and welcome him to our club. So thanks again, and we are really excited to have you, Pete. Now, some project announcements. If you all could line up Del Snowberger and Bob Hunt and Phil Lakin. We've got some announcements coming from our Club Foundation Grant Committee. Del?
The Eastern Oklahoma chapter of the Arthritis Foundation submitted a grant request to our Rotary Club for $2,000, which the Grants Committee did approve. Sherry O'Neill, if you'd come up, is here to accept the check and tell us how the money will be used.
Thank you guys so much. What we're going to use the money for is something unique. We have 820,000 Oklahomans who suffer from a form of arthritis. And what the Arthritis Foundation does is try, number one, to find a cure. And we're getting close in some areas, but until we do, we need to figure out a way to help people who have the disease live better. So what we're going to do with the money, and we're so excited, you know, when we go to health fairs, we have educational information, but the money that we're going to use is to purchase a heel scan machine, and that will allow us to have participants come and have a test that will detect early osteoporosis. So we're very excited about where we can go with this, and I just want to say a huge thank you for helping us.
Thank you. The privilege I have is to introduce Tracy Davis. Come here, Tracy. Come stand here. She is the new development director at Counseling and Recovery Services, and you all know that we have, from time to time, assisted the development of the Recovery Services building and business they call the Comm Center. And we've got a $3,200 check for her because she needs this money, and she'll tell you how and tell you just how much this means to the overall organization. Tracy Davis.
Thanks, Bob. As Bob said, this grant is for our Calm Center, which is a 24-hour-a-day center run by Counseling and Recovery Services. It's for children ages 10 to 17 who suffer from some really serious challenges, from mental health to substance abuse. These kids come in and are really suffering. So this particular grant is for us to purchase an industrial-sized washer and dryer. And this is something that is going to be such a huge asset to the Calm Center because a lot of our children come in the middle of the night with only the clothing on their back. So we need to provide them with clean clothing, bedding, toiletries, all kinds of stuff. So we so appreciate your continued support. And if anyone's interested, please feel free to grab me after the program. I'm happy to meet with you on another occasion and give you a tour of the Calm Center. We love doing that and meeting with people in the community and telling them more about what we do. So thank you so much.
So good afternoon. You may have read or seen in media reports that there are 5 public meetings regarding the new sales tax and bond package that is being presented to voters. It's a $919 million package that the council and mayor have collectively put together. Now, this is a combination of the third penny sales tax, which is tried and true. We've been passing that since 1980, and the Fix Our Streets package. The last one we had was in 2008. That provided about $452 million just dedicated to streets. Didn't take care of police cars or fire trucks or anything else. This package, $919 million, 71%, or about $650 million, will go towards streets. So we'll be by far the largest streets package we've ever had. 9% goes to culture and recreation. It's $10 million to the zoo, $10 million to the library, $35 million to parks and rec. So 9%, almost 10% actually, to culture and recreational activities. And then 7% to police and fire. That's SCBAs, so the self-contained breathing apparatus and all that other stuff that's important for fire rescue, police cars, fire engines, all those kinds of things. So it's really important that you make your voice known. We've done our best job as counselors to build that list. There's no pork in it, and there's no raising of taxes or anything else. What we're trying to do is just take care of the essential infrastructure needs of our city. So we had our first meeting last night. It was standing room only. In fact, the fire marshal had to close the door and turn people away. It was that packed. So maybe we just need to get a bigger room next time. There are 4 more meetings, so I encourage everybody to attend, because if you don't attend and you don't say, I support this project, then the project could get taken off the list. If you have a project that we missed, it's very important that we hear which one we missed. Though we did, I think, and I hope and pray, a very good job. So July 30th, Martin Regional Library. August 5th, OU Schusterman Center Auditorium. August 6th, Rudisill Regional Library. And August 13th, Carbondale Assembly of God. You don't have 6 o'clock. All of them start at 6 o'clock. There's really not a lot of talking heads up there talking. It's 15 minutes worth of video and the mayor and the counselor talking from that district, and then all public comments from that point forward until about 7:30. And if you have an individual question, you can then go and talk to a department head. So we're really trying to get the public's comments so that we can vote in August for the final package that then goes to vote in November. So all these dates will be published in the newspaper, but just pay attention and let your voice be known. Thank you all.
Thank you, Phil. That was educational only. So we are not advocating for anything, and I appreciate you doing that, because we are a group that's important to have us weigh in on these big issues as they come around. So Phil, I appreciate all of your hard work. Let's welcome our Sergeant at Arms, Janet Rockefeller.
Hello. Hopefully my slideshow will show this time. You don't want to look at me the whole time. I did put a handout on your table, and it's bigger print, and it includes OU. Go figure. So hopefully we can get a little more participation. We really had a great week this week with several Rotarians paying fines and several Rotarians making the news, and you will see yourself acknowledged at a later time. So the fines for this week, we'll go ahead and start. First, Norm Simon, you were the one caught this week exemplifying service above self. He is a mediator for RSVP, and that's the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, and that's also received money from the Club Foundation grant, so that's really great. Thanks, Norm. Great job. The next fine, oh, and there he is in the newspaper. There you go. I can bring it and you can autograph it for me and we can put you on the news again. Okay. So the next one we have, the first fine, Bob Lucy. Bob wasn't here last week, I don't think, but he wanted to acknowledge his daughter Dana and her wonderful award as being Tulsa's PR Professional of the Year. So Dana, again, congratulations. And then here we have Beverly Marquardt called me and said, oh my gosh, Linda Bradshaw was awarded by the Tulsa Business Journal a Woman of Distinction for 2013, and there she is accepting her award. So congratulations. We've always known she's a woman of distinction, so we're glad that you got an award for that. Okay, Terry McDonald sent in $116, $66 for his birthday, $43 for years of marriage, $4 for his first grandson, and $3 for his second grandson, so thank you very much. And then we have Carl Vincent, and he paid $200. And I never did find out why, except I know he wants to support the Rotary programs that these fines fund, such as Partners in Education, Water Wells Project, Rebuilding Together, which is a foundation grant recipient. So thank you very much, Carl. Okay, and then Tricia Kirkstra gave $69 for her birthday and the number of years she's been in Rotary. So happy birthday, Tricia. Have a good birthday week. But Tricia also told me that the email that I sent her went to her junk mail. So what's up with that? So anyway, if you get, would you check your junk mail and just see if you have a reminder from me? I don't know why I've been classified as junk, but I have been called worse. So anyway, just check your email for junk, and we'll keep rolling on the fines. Thanks so much. Oh, and wear your pin next week.
Okay, we have an amazing speaker today. I can't wait. You know, Boston Avenue Methodist Church is considered among the greatest cathedrals in the world, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. The church can be easily seen in the Tulsa skyline with its 258-foot tower. Now, our special guest today came when the church was surrounded by an oasis of car companies. The young man nurtured, restored, and enhanced this iconic building while working in his office in that tower. Rotarian of the Day, Matt Davis, is here with the formal introduction.
He was the leader for 33 years of Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. He brought in 8,500 new members to the church during his tenure. He grew the endowment from $200,000 to more than $31 million. He has raised millions for his beloved Southern Methodist University, and the Perkins School of Theology at SMU named him its Distinguished Alumnus of 2012. I have been blessed to hear him deliver a new, freshly written sermon every week for the last 16 years, and I've never taken a single one of them for granted, knowing I was getting to hear one of the truly great preachers of our generation. But the work I am most proud of is his extensive work in interfaith and interracial relations. He is the recipient of so many awards in this area that I will refer you to his bio. But we all, as Rotarians, have been a witness to his tireless efforts to build bridges between diverse faiths in the Tulsa community and between the races that make up this wonderful city. As a Rotarian for more than 40 years, he needs no introduction, but it is my profound honor to introduce my minister, the Reverend Dr. Mouzon Biggs, Jr.
25 years ago, the Rotarians down in Texas decided they could have a much better Presidents-elect training seminar if they brought the whole state together. By doing that, they were able to gather 1,200 people with Presidents-elect, spouses, and all the many district governors who came to teach classes. The past 23 years, I've been their kickoff speaker on Friday noon as they began their weekend. So every year, Donna's wonderful in looking for the theme of the new president's year. I usually have 2 to 3 weeks after it's announced before I speak on that theme down in Dallas. So when President Karen asked me if I would speak at the beginning of her new year, I thought she wanted me to give that speech. But instead she said, no, I don't really want you to give that speech. I want you to reflect on your own life and ministry and time in Rotary. So I hope this is the speech she wanted me to give. My father was not a minister. My father worked 43 years for a little natural gas company down in Carthage, Texas. I grew up 6 miles outside that small town at a huge compressor station where a dozen Ingersoll Rand compressors thumped away 24 hours a day. But my mother and father believed church was important, and they took me, my sister, and brother to Sunday school and church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. And when I was a senior in high school, I felt, without hearing words with my ears, that God was calling me to preach. I simply told my pastor and that small congregation that I felt I was being called to preach, and they all promised to support me with their prayers. That summer, I was working for a drilling mud company, loading and unloading 100-pound sacks of drilling mud, getting ready to go to SMU in the end of August. The 1st of August, the district superintendent drove up to the place I was working and asked my boss if he could talk to me. And what he said was that there were 2 little churches about 25 miles outside my hometown that had no pastor. The pastor was getting a divorce. Back in those days, that meant he was out. He couldn't be a United Methodist minister. And I said, but I've never preached. I'm 2 months out of high school. And he said, we have no one else. He said, there's really nothing to this. You go to college 5 days a week. You visit parishioners all day Saturday. You write a sermon Saturday night. You drive to the smaller church and preach at 9 o'clock. You have 30 minutes to drive 17 miles back to the bigger church and preach at 11. You have all Sunday afternoon to write another sermon. You preach at 7:30, and you go back to college the next morning. I started shaking my head, and he said, you did want to be a Methodist preacher, didn't you? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you begin Sunday. And he drove away. I want to tell you, first of all, how Rotary changed my life. I started doing what this district superintendent and bishop had told me I needed to do. I couldn't go to SMU right away because these 2 little churches were right near the Louisiana-Texas border. So I went to Centenary College, our Methodist school, older than LSU, older than Tulane, a wonderful little Methodist college that's been graduating 250 students every year for 180 years. I did what I was told. But I decided if this was the routine I was going to get into, I might as well just go through the summers and get this done. So I was graduated from Centenary in 3 years, and from that point started commuting all the way to Dallas to go to graduate school at SMU. Gail and I were married by that time. We had the cheapest little Volkswagen you could buy, didn't even have a radio, and we would drive that 175 miles, and Gail saved up a little bit of money, bought a little wooden recorder, and she would play hymns from the hymn book as we drove to Dallas and back. So every Sunday night to Dallas and every Friday afternoon back to these 2 little churches, visit all day Saturday, write a sermon Saturday night, preach twice on Sunday morning, write a sermon, preach Sunday night, drive back to Dallas. I was fully graduated from 7 years of college and graduate school and fully ordained when I was 24. I was sent to be minister of evangelism at the Memorial Drive Church in Houston, a very fast-growing neighborhood. I rang doorbells, and we took in 1,324 in 2 years. So the bishop now said, I want you to be the Sunday night preacher at First Methodist Church. Because you see, when most seminary students were graduated, they had preached 4 or 5 times in a homiletics class. I had preached 1,000 times. 1,000 times by the time I was ordained. So I became the Sunday night preacher at First Methodist Houston. Now, Dr. Charles L. Allen was the senior pastor. He preached twice every Sunday morning. He was drawing the biggest crowds of any Methodist preacher in America, but the Sunday night crowd was averaging fewer than 100. I said I would like to try that. And Dr. Allen said, I can't hit the ball for you, but I can put you up to bat. So he got me invitations to Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, Lions clubs, business and professional women, gardens clubs. I was speaking almost every day to some group in Houston to see if I could draw people into the downtown, into the heart of that city every Sunday night. One of those days, I was speaking at a Rotary club. There was a very young district governor named Don Strickland. He heard me speak and immediately asked me if I would speak at his district conference at College Station, Texas the next spring. I spoke at that conference. At all district conferences, there are president's representatives, and the president's representative at that conference was Ben Hormel from McCook, Nebraska, the famous Hormel Meat Company family. Ben Hormel invited me to speak at a Zone Institute in New Orleans. About 6 weeks after I'd spoken in New Orleans, I got a call from the Bishop of Arkansas. And this bishop said, I'm inviting you to come and speak to all the Rotarians of Arkansas next spring. You can fly into Little Rock. I'll drive you down to Hot Springs. You make your address. I'll drive you back to the airport in Little Rock. And I said, of course, I'll be there. I'd hardly hung up the phone. Maybe 30 minutes had passed when I got a call from a school superintendent in Stuttgart, Arkansas, who said, I've just done a dirty deed to you. I am the governor of Rotarians of Arkansas. I heard you in New Orleans. I was afraid if I asked you to speak, you would decline, so I asked my bishop to invite you to speak. And I said, okay. But you don't understand something, and that is bishops don't meet my plane. I meet bishops' planes. I drive them. I take them back to the airport. And he said, my bishop said he would. So I got off the plane in Little Rock expecting to see a bishop with smoke coming out of his ears. And instead, he was so kind and so gracious, drove me to Hot Springs, introduced me as the greatest young Methodist preacher in America. And he had never even met me before. On the way back to Little Rock, he said to me, how long have you been an associate? And I said, almost 9 years. And he said, it's time for you to have your own church again. It's time for you to have your own church. Now, you tell your bishop when you get back to Houston that I said it's time for him to, his words, bow his neck and put you in a top church. I don't tell bishops what to do. I thanked him very much. I got on the plane and flew back to Houston. And lo and behold, a year and a half later, my bishop was playing golf at a bishop's convocation, had a massive heart attack, and died. And the Arkansas bishop, who had been forced into retirement because of age, was called out of retirement to come to Houston to be my bishop. And when Gail and I went to the reception welcoming him, I could tell he looked like he'd seen me before, but he wasn't sure just who I was, and I told him. I said, Bishop, remember you drove me to Hot Springs and back? Oh, yes, of course. I said, do you remember what you said to me on the way back to the airport in Little Rock? He said he didn't remember. And I said, well, what you said was that I was to go tell my bishop that he was to bow his neck and put me in a top church, and God has sent you to take care of that. And he laughed. But 3 months later, he called me, and he said, I'm making you the pastor of Trinity Methodist Church in Beaumont, Texas. And he said, I want to put this in perspective for you. I have 12 district superintendents, and 11 of them voted against your going there because they say you're much too young. I want you to go over there and show them I know what I'm doing. And if you do this well, in 7 or 8 years, you could go to Boston Avenue. He had pastored this church 10 years. He knew it well. Well, he had to retire again 2 years later. But guess what? The man who succeeded him had pastored Boston Avenue 12 years. And the two of them talked and convinced the Bishop of Oklahoma that I would be a match with that congregation. And Rotary opened that door for me. It opened that door. Appointments were made very differently then from the way they are now. Bishops are not so heavy-handed today as they were then. I was told by my bishop down in Texas, if you want to go to Boston Avenue, you'll just have to say yes if he should call you, because he's an old German. He was in the Evangelical United Brethren Church, which was the German-speaking branch of Methodism, but united with our church, our denomination, in 1968, and he became a bishop in the Methodist Church. And he said, so he does things a little differently. If you ask him how much they pay at Boston Avenue, it'll turn him off. He thinks you should be happy at Tishomingo or Wapanucka. And don't ask him if they have a parsonage or how much housing allowance. It'll turn him off. If you want to go, you just say yes, sir. I'd never seen Boston Avenue Church. I knew no one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I got a call from the Bishop of Oklahoma, and it was this short. Dr. Biggs, I've met today with the Pastor Parish Relations Committee of Boston Avenue Church and the cabinet of the state of Oklahoma, and I'm inviting you to come and be pastor of that church. Will you do this? And I said, I will. And he said, then let me explain this to you. Your predecessor's just been elected a bishop. So Boston Avenue, having receptions and teas and going away, I don't want you in the way. If I hear that you've crossed the Red River before the moving date I'm about to give you, I'll nullify this appointment. Are we clear about that? I said, we're clear. And so that Thursday in August 1980, Gail and I put 3 small children in 2 cars and drove over 500 miles and got here after dark. We stopped at a service station and asked, where is Boston Avenue Methodist Church? They told us how to get there. She followed me. Church was dark, really dark. There were hundreds of lights on Fred Jones Ford. Fred Jones Ford on 3 sides of the church. New cars in service all the way down Boston Avenue, a huge parts distribution building on the north side, and all the pre-owned ones down Cincinnati. Lots of lights, but not on the church, and we couldn't get in. I had a phone number of the chair of the board, so we found the telephone, and I called him, and he told us how to get to the parsonage, unlocked the door, and we went in and slept. I didn't see the congregation until that Sunday morning. I walked into the pulpit, and they didn't see me. That's how we came to Tulsa. But people in Texas who had lived in Tulsa, who were moved by oil companies, had said, oh, you're going to love Tulsa. Tulsa's Dallas. Oklahoma City's Fort Worth. Now, only Texans really understand that, but having gone to SMU, I understand that. He said in Tulsa, they have ballet, they have opera, they have symphony, they have Gilcrease, they have Philbrook. Oklahoma City has the Cowboy Hall of Fame. In Tulsa, they drive Mercedes-Benz and BMWs. Oklahoma City drives Ford and Chevrolet pickups. That's the way you were described to me before I got here. And of course, when we got here, we discovered a city that we came to love very much. Gail and I sent our 2 sons to SMU. They were graduated, but both of them worked their way back to Tulsa because they loved this city. They wanted their children to grow up where they had grown up, with this same wonderful city supporting and surrounding them. I knew what my job was at Boston Avenue Church. I knew that I needed to build an endowment fund to keep up that magnificent building. I knew I needed to win as many people as I could into membership of that church so that it would not be a declining church, but a growing church with a long influence in the heart of the city. But I also knew that I was going to allot a certain amount of time to be beyond my congregation. Because growing up in East Texas, I had seen what prejudice and bigotry could do. I grew up at a time when service stations still had white restrooms and colored restrooms, white water fountains and colored water fountains. When it was understood that if a black person and a white person met on the sidewalk, the black person was supposed to step off and let the white person pass. We had 2 high schools, one on the west side, all white, and one on the east side, all black. My junior year in high school, I was vice president of the student body, and my senior year, I was president. We had an assembly program every Friday. I was responsible for the programs that senior year. We had a moral issue before our small town, and I decided a panel of clergy might be helpful to speak to this big assembly program. And when I called the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Carthage, he said, "I'm not sitting on a panel with that Methodist." And I knew that wasn't right. It wasn't right. When I got to Centenary College, I got to know my first Jews. I knew no Jews in Carthage. Everybody was a Methodist or a Baptist, and they couldn't get along. And here we had Jews, a husband and a wife, both of whom had taught at the University of Berlin until Adolf Hitler came to power, and then they were relieved of their duties. They were told to go home and be quiet, and they would receive a meager stipend, but they would not be allowed to teach again in Germany. After Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when synagogues were destroyed and Jewish businesses were burned, this couple understood this is really, really bad. And they sacrificed everything they had to be smuggled across Belgium with their one little boy. And when they got to England, it took everything they had to get portage on a ship to New Orleans, Louisiana, and train tickets to Shreveport, where they knew about a Jewish family. They wired ahead and said, "We've had to spend everything. If you could help us start over, we would be forever grateful." And when they stepped off the train in Shreveport, Louisiana, with this small son of theirs, the president of our Methodist college was standing there asking, "Will you teach for us?" They were almost 70 when they taught me. I had 2 years of German, while I was also taking Latin, but I was a history major, and they taught history of Western civilization. They taught the history of Russia. the history of England. They were magnificent. They were teaching almost entirely Christian kids 5 days a week, going to the synagogue every Friday night. And I knew there was no way God had ever turned his back on them, had ever invalidated their covenant with him. Dr. Bruno and Berta Strauss said, one day you must go to Germany. The Germans are strong people. They will reunite their country. You must go to Berlin and walk through the Brandenburg Gate. You must walk down Unter den Linden, these magnificent trees. Have food. Use the right verb forms, they said, if you do not find your way. The word help in German does not use the accusative, but the dative. If you use the accusative, they may not help you. You must use the dative. Gail and I have been to Berlin. We took our sons to Berlin. In 1988, we couldn't get through the Brandenburg Gate. There were huge German shepherd dogs patrolling through the Brandenburg Gate. But Gail and I have been back twice since then. You can walk through it now. You can walk under den Linden trees. You can order food. And if you get lost, you can say, "Helfen Sie mir bitte," and they will help you. But in my work with interfaith understanding, I felt I couldn't really understand unless I saw some of these horrible places where Jews were so mistreated. Wasn't enough for me to see a movie, so Gail and I arranged for a private guide to take us to Majdanek in Poland. It's probably the best preserved of them all. It's not a touristy place. We walked 5 hours through Majdanek and saw only one other couple. Just our guide showing Gail and me. Those horrible chambers, those horrible ovens, barbed wire fences, electrified. We took a day off, and then we went to Auschwitz, and we spent 5 hours. Our guide said, you need to eat something. We're not hungry. Eat, he said. Eat a little soup, something, because then he took us to Birkenau. It was the ultimate in German design. That's where the famed Judenrampe is, if you saw Schindler's List, where they now had it down that a train came right through the front gates of the concentration camp, stopped at the Jewish ramp and started taking people left, right, some to die instantly, some to work on a detail 3-4 weeks before they too would be gassed and burned. On a later trip, I asked Gail if she would go with me to more camps. I felt I needed to be there to see how horrible that was. We've been to Sachsenhausen. We've been to Ravensbrück. We've been to Flossenburg. We've been to Buchenwald. We've been to Dachau. Hours in every camp. Hours. How can I not believe that every black person, every Jew, every breathing being is a child of the Almighty? And how can I not do anything and everything possible to create goodwill, understanding? Rabbi Itzhak Greenberg in New York is a conservative Jew. I've heard him speak twice here in Tulsa. On both occasions, he said, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I went to Jewish schools. Everything I knew about Christians was bad. They had called us Jesus killers, Christ killers, and 6.5 million of us ended up dying in the Holocaust. But one day, he said, when I was walking across the bridge at Selma, Alabama, with a Catholic bishop's arms linked to mine, I decided I needed to take a new look at Christianity. When I saw a Methodist bishop escorting 5 little black children into the public schools of Little Rock, Arkansas, I decided I need to give Christianity another look. Because you see, it's finally what we do. One of the people in our Jewish Christian dialogue group said one time, I don't care what you sing on Sunday. I don't care what you pray on Sunday. I just care how your kids treat my kids on Monday morning. That's what Moses taught. That's what the prophets taught. That's what Jesus taught. That's what Paul taught. It's what Rotary teaches. Shortly after I came to Boston Avenue, I asked our committee to invite a special guest to come and do a series if they'd ever had a rabbi. They hadn't. I asked the committee, have any of you ever heard a rabbi preach? No. I said, you need to hear one. You need to hear a rabbi. And they agreed to let me invite one. There were 5 brilliant young students in Germany who were thrown out of the University of Berlin because they were Jews in 1934, and the seminary, Cincinnati, invited them to come to America to scholarship them, and those 5 became tremendous leaders in Judaism in America. I invited one of them, Rabbi Herman Schallman in Chicago. And when I wrote to him, I said, Rabbi, I don't want you to try to convince us that Jesus was not the Messiah. And I promise we will not try to convince you that he was. I want you to preach the 4 greatest sermons you've ever written in your life and see if my people can understand that you and I are worshiping the same God. He wrote back and said, I'd love to do that. I will never forget those 4 presentations. Since then, my committee says, could we have another rabbi? Could we have another rabbi? And we've had 4 in our series now. But let me tell you about the last night. The God of Auschwitz was the title. And he talked about how some Jews decided after the Holocaust, there is no God. If there'd been a God, this never, ever could have happened to us. Some Jews decided, well, there may be one, but if there is, he's not involved. He's simply not participating. And then there's another group, he said, and I belong to that group. He said, while I was a student at Hebrew Union in Cincinnati, I had more and more news about how bad things were in Germany. But we were not allowed to go home. We were told we would simply become victims as well. And so it was only at the end of the war that I got to go home. My mother had perished at Dachau, and my father in the prison in Munich. I went to Dachau, he said, and I walked through the camp where my mother had died. And finally, right on through the back. And right at the very back of the camp, he said, there was the luscious, most beautiful green grass I'd ever seen. Suddenly I was overcome with emotion. He said, I fell down on my knees and my fingertips went down into the soil. And then I recoiled because I realized this soil was so porous and the grass so green because it was growing out of human cremains, my mother's cremains. But as I wept there, I understood that every Jewish child who died had broken the heart of God. Every teenager who had died had broken God's heart. Every adult who had died had broken God's heart. And that somehow I was called for the rest of my life to do whatever I could to help heal God's broken heart. And then he looked at my congregation and said, but who am I to tell you about the God of the broken heart? And he sat down, and so will I.
I would say that was perfect. Thank you. We have a book which absolutely has nothing to do with Mouzon. It's called The Ugly Duckling, which will go to Celia Clinton. So thank you for signing that. I'm still getting my sea legs up here, so I forgot to introduce Matt the way you should appropriately, so I'm going to do it now. Matt serves as club president in 2005 and 6. He is president of the Davis Group Limited. He's currently serving as president of the Tulsa Historical Society. He has been a member of our club since February 1988. He is a Club Foundation Fellow, Paul Harris Fellow, and Rotary Foundation benefactor. He is a lover of beautiful old cars and one beautiful woman. Please welcome Rotarian of the Day. That's what I should have done. Matt Davis. Mouzon again, thank you. Next week, we'll have Roger Randall, and I think he'll have some fun with us next week. He's going to be talking about civility and politics. So that will be interesting. And the following week, we'll have Rand Suffolk, and he'll talk about the Philbrook in downtown Tulsa and its presence. And then finally, back to our slide. Who do you think this mysterious Rotarian is? Does anybody have a guess? Yes. It is Tom Hardcastle. Tom, would you stand up? Tom. Tom was working at GE. He was a trainee, and Ronald Reagan was the host of the GE Hour on Sunday nights. And so their paths crossed when Reagan was a fledgling star, and little did Tom know that a future president would use his back to sign something. So it's a great story. Thank you, Tom, for sharing that. And remember to continue to serve in our community throughout the week. Have a wonderful week. See you next time.